Welcome to the From Concealment Podcast, the show for firearm enthusiasts who like to shoot, train, carry, and compete. Get ready for some shooting insight, firearm and accessory reviews, and of course, insight on concealed carry. And now, broadcasting from behind enemy lines in the From Concealment studio, it's Pete Mitchell and Dan Sams.
Hey, Freedom Nation, this is Pete Mitchell.
And I am Dan Sams in flannel today.
Nice. Yeah. And you're listening to the only Freedom podcast on the entire interwebs, the From Concealment podcast, which, by the way, a friend of mine wants to come on the show. She wants to I can't remember what she said the topic was because I think she's listened to a couple of our episodes. She's the gal who's right now moving to West Virginia. And so I had her listen to that episode where, like, you waxed eloquently about how great West Virginia is, and so she's definitely of like mind with you on that.
Awesome, praise the Lord.
She also bought the SIG P365, and so I was like, well, let's get a review on that sucker because I've actually never shot a SIG. I'm a Glock and Springfield guy more than anything else. And so she's like, yeah, absolutely. So we'll have her on in one of the coming weeks.
Yeah. But
what's going on with you, man?
Oh, man. Well, speaking of West Virginia, I spent some time there this past weekend, got out in the woods, did some shooting. Actually, I went up there. I took my whole chest rig and AR and everything just in case the Civil War started while I was there. Got to be ready. But also wanted to go shooting.
And your MREs, I'm sure, of course, you know.
Yeah, those are always in the van.
Right.
But we go up there and I got to do some shooting. Anyway, I thought it was just chilly enough. So I put my camo Whoopee hoodie, which I recommend. And then I put my chest rig over top of that. And I've got my operator cap. I've got my AR. I've got my shooting gloves on. And let's just say, like, I look freaking cool. And I'm walking past my reflection in the van, and I'm like, this is like the first I've been this tricked out, you know, with the like hoodie on underneath. And I'm like, dang it, I look good. Right. And so,
dude, let's face it, that's the reason why 90% of the guys buy that stuff. It's so they can look a certain way.
But let me just tell you, it does something. If you really are doing some training, looking like an operator helps you feel like an operator. It's like wearing a suit to a business meeting.
I really wonder what operators think. I wonder if they look at those guys and just go, you're just a bunch of, and then whatever, right? Like,
yeah,
I could see them having some colorful language.
I'd like to talk to some legit operators because none of my buddies pretend like we're operators. We're just like,
I don't know if I could get any of mine on because you know this, like one of my old roommates from college, he was the guy who wrote the book. They got into all the trouble because he was on SEAL Team 6 and he was on the mission that got bin Laden. And so I was talking with him a lot back then because, you know, we were, you know, roommates or housemates technically in college. And everything he does, like even today when he does speaking engagements, he's got all these rules. So when he's hired to come in and do a talk, they're not allowed to promote him. Everyone has to be metal detected when they go in. No one's allowed to take cell phones in. No one's allowed to get any pictures, no audio recordings, nothing. Or like, and that's part of like the reason why companies bring them in is it's kind of like this fun thing.
Yeah.
And then you got the other guy who claims that, you know, he's the one who actually shot bin Laden, which is probably true. Because my buddy was the second guy through the door. And this is the first guy. And he's out there, oh, it was me, you know, and he's just, you know, he doesn't really care. But my buddy's point is he goes, look, dude, these aren't second graders we were fighting. They got a long memory. I am in no rush to like put my face out there publicly and say, I'm one of the guys who got bin Laden.
Yeah. I would want to keep that completely quiet.
As much as possible, right? I mean...
Actually, I think if I was in that situation, I mean, my guess is I would encourage other people to make up stories. Like, it's kind of like the whole I'm Spartacus, right? Where, like, you ever seen Spartacus? Where everybody's standing up saying they're Spartacus. Let's just get everybody claiming that they shot bin Laden. That way, like, there's too many of us for you to come for.
Yeah, so I don't know that I could get him on because even if I did, I don't know, he would probably want his voice, like, altered. But I don't know that I could even get him on.
What if we did a because this would be freaking awesome.
Oh, yeah.
What if we pre-recorded him, edited the video, or, man, what if we got it transcripted and we read for him and we have an actor read for him, right? We could do that. I'd read for him. I've done voiceover. I would read for him. That would be awesome. We could do that.
That would be kind of cool.
Seriously, you should reach out to him.
And here's what
you need to, and one of the things we need to know is how bad do they view us LARPers, right? Because
I'm pretty sure it's like, if I were to ask him, he would be like, yeah, we don't, all you guys who dress up and play games, we're not impressed.
And so then I would say, come and teach us, because none of us are pretending.
Oh, he would for a price. I guarantee you he would for a price.
Because none of us are pretending like we know that much, right? But like, I'm at least readier than I
think some of them are pretending like they're operators.
Those guys are in a different category. All of us think those guys are schmucks, right?
Yeah, but then where do you draw the line? Like, where's the line that goes schmuck versus...
Here's where I think the line is.
Okay.
It's the same as the guy who shows up at the gun range, who has never shot guns, but says, I grew up around guns my whole life. I don't need anybody to tell me anything, right? That mentality of the guy who is not only trying to look cool, but pretends like he knows something. Completely different than the guy who shows up and who is like I have a buddy that came and shot with me, shows up and he's so humble. He's like, listen, man, I've got some cool stuff because my dad's given me some really cool, cool ammo and stuff like that. I'm just buying this gun, blah, blah, blah. He's giving me that whole thing. And he's like, I don't know anything, man. He's like, just because I have cool stuff doesn't mean I know something. So if I do something wrong, tell me. I will not be offended. Like, that humility, I think, makes the difference. Right. And so I hope, I don't know how they're going to look at me, but I hope if like that dude came around, I would be like, listen, dude, I don't know jack. I'm going to try to be as ready as I can so that when I train, I'm actually training with legit stuff. But like, please teach me. I'm hoping the humility makes a difference is what I'm saying. Because
I don't know if you remember this, but when we were having all the riots out here in California, someone in LA County dressed up in their full gear with their AR and their pistol sidearm and tried to sneak in with one of the National Guard units that had been deployed.
Oh, dear.
And the National Guard could tell just by looking at him, he wasn't one of them. Because they go, well, first of all,
by the way,
he's got better equipment than we've got. So number one.
How bad does it have to be if the National Guard looks at you and says, like, well, this guy's not ready to be here?
Well, they're like, first of all, he's got better equipment than us. So they're like, he's not one of us. Secondly, that's an AR-15, not an, what is it?
Not an M4.
Yeah, an M4. Yeah. They're like, and then thirdly, you either have a pistol or a rifle. You never have both. And he's got both. And so they walk over to the cops and they go, hey, he's not one of us. He's kitted out.
By the way, National Guard couldn't take care of it themselves. They're like, hey, Dad, this guy's trying to play with us and we don't want him to.
Well, they don't have the right to arrest, right?
It's true. They don't.
And there's no open carry in California. So he was like violating all kinds of laws by open carrying the way that he was.
Also, like, that's just a schmuck move. No matter
Apparently, he's a young kid who's like really into airsoft, and everyone's like, he just did a stupid thing. Like, he probably didn't mean anything by it. He just did a really stupid thing.
So, though, there was cracked.com had an article a while back where they had, and they always put a little comedic spin on stuff, but they'd cited something like 4 or 5 times in which a civilian pretended to be military and actually took control of a scene. And what they were pointing out is in some cases, there's 4 or 5 different situations where like they actually took control, like, and the people listened to them. And there was something to do with the fact that like, if you look the right part and have the confidence, we are talking to people who have been trained to follow orders no matter what. And so like they had like some dude took over a neighboring town. Like there was another dude who took control of some, National Guard type scene where there was like a natural disaster and he was running the operation. There's all kinds of stuff. You'd be surprised how many times people pulled it off. Anyway,
interesting.
All that story said, here, I've got all my gear on. I'm embarrassed to walk inside because I'm afraid my wife's going to make fun of me. Right? I'm afraid she's going to be like, got all your stuff on again, huh? However, because she hates the camo Whoopie hoodie, she just hates it. She thinks it's ugly. She's like, I could have handled black, but you got camo. And I'm like, it was all that was available and I needed. Anyway, I walk inside though, and she gives me, without going into detail, a positive look.
Nice.
And I clearly realized this is working for me.
This is why operators get so much action. Is basically
it's looking cool is the biggest thing. And even my sister is like, I got to admit, you look cool. And I'm like, what are you going to do? Anyway, spent some good time. My dad, my sister, and I went up into the woods, did some shooting. My dad has this 10-inch gong. We were shooting with the AR. That was a lot of fun. Did some pistol shooting. I actually had my daughter shooting with us a little bit. It was a good time. So, yeah, that was my weekend in West Virginia in God's promised land.
Nice.
Beautiful times. So how about you, man? You doing all right?
Doing all right. I haven't been able to go shooting in a while. And unfortunately, as you know, I had a surgery last week and I got another one coming up. Supposed to be today, got pushed off. I have no idea for when. So I won't be able to go shooting for a while. In fact, yesterday was the first time I was able to take my sidearm out with me because I was no longer on the opioids. And so, that's kind of like, if I have to use my firearm, are you on any medication? Oh, just small little thing, a little class 2 opioid medication,
Just a little thing called Vicodin.
I was taking the generic of whatever. So it might've been Vicodin, the generic version of it. But yesterday I didn't need it anymore. So I stopped taking it. And I was going to church, and I tell you, I got to take a firearm when I go to church. That's just like, I'm going to church.
You got to take a gun.
I got to take a gun.
This isn't communist China. Of course you must.
It's getting to be here in California, especially with church.
Yeah. Really
and
is.
So I was like, all right, it's a Glock 43 day. I need the smallest firearm possible because of the surgery that I had. I'll tell all you guys about it maybe after the next one, because I was telling Dan before this one started, like, just I can't see how I cannot talk about it on my podcast that I do with Dave called The Thriving Christian Business, because it's all about how not to run a business is what these guys have done. Yeah. Like over and over again. And I've been doing these daily videos, from before I decided to do it through the recoup, just so I can like help other people who are thinking about doing the same type of stuff that I'm doing. Mm-hmm. But so I'll probably tell everybody, because I'm almost like, it's such an example of how not to run your business. Mm-hmm. I'm almost like, I almost just have to tell everyone. I just got to like, here's the story. You guys got to hear the story of how bad this was. But anyway, so with all that work that was done, I was like even wearing a sidearm, like anything that would push in on my sides or anything like that, would just hurting, because part of what I had done was this hernia I had it fixed. And so, I mean, it's just like, that's your core. Everything that affects your core hurts. Yeah. So,
yeah, man. Cool. Well, so I'm glad you're better. Well, even though you got more coming, I'm glad you're with us today.
I told you, man, I was like, it's a 6-hour surgery. I could die. Who knows?
I'm like, don't die.
Dude, it's so funny too, because I remember they put me down on the operating table, and the anesthesiologist is like, okay, I'm going to give you something. It might make you feel a little funny. So she gives me something, and I literally don't remember what they said next, but I remember every other time I've been knocked out for surgery, they're like, okay, we want you to count back from 100. There was none of that. It was just like, okay, we're going to knock you out now. Boom, I was out. Next thing I know, they're waking me up freaking 6 hours later. It's like the weirdest time warp ever.
Weird. It really is weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's different than like when you sleep for a night and it feels like you slept for the night. When you're out with something like that, it's a off and on, and you're like,
it's like, where did this period of time go? It was just like nothing.
Yeah.
And you're all groggy, and then they're just like rolling you out to your car and sticking you in the car. They didn't. I mean, this is total outpatient. They're just like, all right, where's your wife at? Where's your wife? Like, let me location search her on my phone. Okay, there she's out in front of the building. Okay, we're taking you down. It was funny.
Yeah, it's quick, man.
But yeah.
Well, I'm glad you're with us, especially because we need to talk about we need to talk about this thing that happened.
Yeah. So there was a mall shooting in, is that Wisconsin? Is that where it was? while you Watso, however you say that. Isn't that Wisconsin? Do you remember? Yeah, Wisconsin Shopping Mall.
I think yeah.
So guy shows up, shoots 8 people. Last I heard, no one's died. Have you heard anything different?
I've not heard anything different. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know that anyone died from it. I don't know what he was shooting. While you Watasoa, however you pronounce that city. The Mayford Mall has a strict no-gun policy, Mayor Dennis said. McBride shared and said, guns have no place in shopping malls or other places in which crowds of people gather. If the shooter had complied with that policy, no one would have been hurt yesterday. Can you literally believe that's what the mayor said?
Yeah.
If the shooter had complied with that policy, no one would have been hurt. Wait a second here, Mr. Mayor. What about if he would have complied with the can't murder, can't assault people, respect other? What if he would have complied with those policies?
Yeah. Well, one of the things that as you're reading it, one of the things that crosses my mind is we tend to gravitate towards our values in a crisis situation. He wanted to go to the no gun policy rather than the don't murder people, right? For him, it's more important to talk about his anti-gun agenda than it is to address the fact that somebody tried to kill 8 or more people. Now, he had to be a crappy shot, or he was shooting some mouse round. Because if nobody was killed, praise the Lord. Right now, what I'm looking up as of today, nobody has died, and so, man, I don't know. I want to know.
Let's face it, like people are absolutely, their lives are changed forever. You can't get shot and not have your life not change forever. Like this is going to be one of those moments in time that you will remember forever and will affect you. I mean, PTSD, the whole thing, right? I mean, it's absolutely going to affect all those people who were there and got shot at, and everyone who got shot.
Yep. So
it's not still like, oh, well, he didn't kill anyone, so really not that bad. This is horrible. This is absolutely horrible.
Yeah. Well, and the fact that it happens in a kind of in a regular setting, nothing to be worried about, and all of a sudden it's a life and death scenario. That messes with a person. That's where I would encourage. My wife does a type of therapy called EMDR that addresses PTSD stuff. And so recommending that for any kind of trauma situation, really, really good stuff. But yeah, this is going to affect people, and it's tragic. But the fact that this mayor is whining about gun policies that so clearly didn't work, just is ridiculous, and I think is reflective of the mentality of the anti-gun crowd. For them, it's shocking that someone didn't follow their ridiculous laws.
Right.
It's even more shocking to them that any of us would think that somebody carrying there would have been able to maybe stop him before he got 8 rounds off, or however many he got off. They just don't get it. They're suspending rationality to be able to think in the way that they're thinking. And so there's not a lot of room to argue with that. And I see that in so many things. We see it in economics. We're seeing it in gun policies, anti-gun policies. I would say we see it even in spiritual issues, where people suspend rationality to hold a particular viewpoint that then they apply in arbitrary ways that don't make sense. And when it doesn't work out, they're not willing to reevaluate their position. They double down on the position. Like what's happened there is his policy, or not that it was necessarily his policy, but the policy of the mall didn't work. But rather than address the fact that, like, crap, that sign did jack to protect anybody there, rather than acknowledge that, he's like, well, I wish somebody just obeyed the rules more. Like, that's where you go. This is ridiculous.
And he goes, like, so I'm looking at his full statement. And so, I mean, he's thanking all the cops and all that. But even that line in that part of the statement where it's like, hey, malls and other places in which crowds of people gather, guns have no place there. It's like, no, that's exactly where I need a gun.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm worried about the one-on-one situation, sure. But it's those places, that's where all these things happen. So that's exactly where guns are needed. Like, what do? Every one of those 911 calls were calling in cops because they wanted more guns there. They wanted good guys with guns.
Mm-hmm.
So this whole idea that, well, we're going to take away guns from everybody except for our people. Like, here's another thing too. It's kind of off subject, but it reminded me of it. I don't know why, but I love binge watching certain reality TV shows. And the one that I binge watched over the last week, because I couldn't really do anything after the surgery except sit there and watch TV, was called To Catch a Smuggler. And so it's all about customs and basically customs, people flying into JFK or LAX or, major airports, and they're trying to smuggle in drugs and animals and food and people. And I like watching that kind of stuff. Yeah. And so they caught leaving the country all these gun parts. They were going to, I want to say, Venezuela. And they go, okay, so a gun here, and these were all AR parts. A gun here that's like $600 will be worth like $20,000 down there. And I'm like, okay, so in other words, guns are illegal in this country. And so they were, working with the Venezuela government so they could, basically do this giant raid, everybody who was supposed to be getting these parts, because clearly they have guns. And all I'm doing is I'm looking at this. And my wife sits down next to me. Probably worst mistake ever, right? Sit down next to me when I'm looking at this. I go, yeah, you want to be the only one with those guns. You don't want the people with those guns, because look at all your men who are kitted up, have the exact same guns you're about ready to go take away from the people. Mm-hmm. And they're all bad and you're all good in your eyes. I'm like, that's the whole problem with these gun laws. Like, you're literally taking away guns from one people because you've declared another group as being holy, righteous, and of no evil. Yeah. And we know that's not the case.
And you're trying to assume, or you're assuming that even if they are good, that they're going to stay good.
Right.
That's the thing that people don't realize, even about insurrections and revolutions, that it tends to be one group of people that make something happen, and then some, dictator sees an opportunity and all of a sudden becomes the leader that ends up perpetrating all kinds of evil. So I've been applying. So in theology, one of the ways we approach people who don't believe in God is what we call presuppositional apologetics, where we essentially just say, all right, so convince me of your opinion. And what you normally do is you just ask questions until you highlight the fact that their presuppositions fall in on themselves. And it's really handy. I find it really good for, sharing the gospel of Christ, because I just ask these questions and people realize that they're actually standing on a biblical worldview to try to argue against it. And then they just kind of get frustrated and they bow out of the conversation, or in some cases they turn around. So I've been applying that in some of these issues related to gun laws, as well as in issues of economics. Because, I'm like, well, if your position is good, man, convince me of it. And so I'll just ask questions. And I've done this with economics. I've done the same thing with guns. And so the question I would ask for the person who is, anti-gun and who will, of course, call the cops to enforce gun laws, I'll say, okay, so do you really believe that it's better if there are no guns? And they'll say, yeah. And then I'm like, okay, so who's going to enforce that? Help me understand who's going to enforce that. And they'll say, well, we got to get some cops to enforce that. And I'm like, okay, will the cops have guns? Well, yeah, the cops have to have guns. So I'm like, okay, so let me just clarify then. You said you were against guns. Now you're for a particular group of people having them. And they'll usually say, well, yeah, okay. And I'm like, let me just acknowledge that is different than what you said before. So now you have changed your statement to a new statement. And that's fine. We can say that. But now you believe that this particular group is the only group that should have guns. Yes. I'm like, okay, can you guarantee that all of those people will be wholesome people and use them correctly? Well, and then it gets into fun things. So I just let them talk, and then I just keep asking questions and just ask the very gentle, like, okay, well, help me. If that's the case, then why does ... or how would we ... Force them. Like, I'm not the one trying to take somebody's freedom away. I don't have to defend my position. If you're going to take away somebody else's rights, you're the one who has the burden of proof upon you. I don't have to go around arguing why guns are okay to have. If you're going to take a person's property from them, the burden of proof is on you. And so I just gently ask the questions. And usually it frustrates them enough because they're forced to look at their own view. It frustrates them enough they just quit. I'm happy to do that. I'm happy to force them to think about it hard enough that they get so frustrated with the fact that their view is irrational that they just bow out of the conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did that with somebody related to the lockdown stuff. And I'm like, so, because their whole thing is like, we got to stop this virus. And I'm like, okay. I'm like, they're like, what do you think we should do? And I'm like, well, because they were talking about thousands dying daily. I'm like, well, I think we should ban abortion. And they're like, what? I'm like, we have more people dying from that every day. And they're like, oh, I don't want to talk about that. And then we got into the whole issue of how many vehicular deaths are occurring daily. I'm like, do you have a gun? Or do you have a car? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, you recognize more people are dying from cars. If going out is what you see is causing the virus, then doesn't it make sense that you shouldn't drive either? More people are dying from cars. You're putting people at risk. And so I just asked the question, well, then they just get frustrated and they quit talking to me, which is ultimately my goal anyway.
Right.
Just want people to leave me alone. Anyway, all this stuff, back to the whole issue of the Wisconsin mayor, he just doesn't get it. His position is not rational, and it's hard to argue with that.
No, but it also just makes me look at that. And on one hand, I would say, okay, if you vote for a man or woman that has that poor a judgment and doesn't understand, that's not even the law that should be concerning. It should be that this guy actually wanted to shoot people. Like, that law is a bigger break. It's like the reason why there are different fines for different laws. Speeding is not the same as murder, right? We don't hold it in the same account. We don't treat you the same way. Taking a gun into a gun-free zone, we don't take it in the same way as someone who murders someone or attempts to murder someone.
Yeah.
Like, why aren't you more offended there? So why would you vote for someone whose views are so backward that they don't understand that this person violated a much higher law, much more important law? And if you're voting for him, you're part of the problem. And of course, we know just by looking at this guy is a Democrat. Like, we don't even need to look him up to know this guy is a Democrat, because that's the stupid crap you would hear out of a Democrat.
Yep.
And the problem is we're starting to hear that crap out of Republicans too. As you and I have said, they're really two sides of the same coin.
No.
And that's what we're starting to see come from Republicans as well. I saw a great meme, and it said, if all of those people who voted Republican had voted Libertarian instead, we'd finally have a Libertarian president.
I know.
That would do all these, different things. And I'm like, yeah, because why is everyone saying the Libertarians threw away their votes and ruined the chances for the Republicans? The Republicans are just as bad as the Democrats. They're not better than the Democrats.
Republicans have been throwing away votes for a long time.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. It's driving me crazy, man. Yeah. It's just a whole different time. And having some of these conversations with people who, even some who claim to be libertarian, that's the new thing that's annoying me. It's the guys who claim to be libertarian and have no idea about libertarian principles of non-aggression and other things. Like, I know a guy who claims to be libertarian and he's pro lockdown and thinks there should be seems to be somewhat anti-gun. And I'm like, well, you're not a libertarian. Like, I don't know what you are, but you're certainly not a libertarian, so shut up.
I know. I had one of my buddies from college. He reached out to me. Hadn't talked to him in 20 years. And he actually calls me because we clearly have two different sides. Like, he's very liberal. I'm very conservative. And we're Facebook friends. And he reaches out to me on phone and we chat. And he says, I'm actually more of a libertarian. And I just wanted to go, dude, I don't think you know what a libertarian is. You are not a libertarian. You are so far from being a libertarian. It ain't even funny. But yeah, I think we just kind of, I think that's what I am. And even myself, I can't say I'm a true libertarian because I don't subscribe to everything that the libertarians believe and hold to.
Well, here's what's important. You have to draw a distinction between the Libertarian Party and actual libertarian principles. The Libertarian Party is not very libertarian.
Really?
So I always like to point that out. They're not very libertarian at all, and it frustrates the heck out of me. But I'm pretty libertarian. I would say I'm closest to Ron Paul in my political philosophies. So whatever that means to people, if you know who Ron Paul is. And if you don't, you're certainly not a libertarian.
If you don't, then I don't even know where you've been living. Like, he's the thorn in everyone's side for like decades now.
He's the man. So actually, it's fun. I'm reading those Tuttle Twin books to my kids,
Right.
and it's so good. And I don't know. There's one where they go off to camp, and there's a Chief Ron that teaches them the principle of non-aggression at the camp. It's this beautiful nod to Ron Paul. It's awesome.
That's
You got to
funny.
read Tuttle Twins. They're the best. Yeah, your kids are actually coming into the perfect age for Tuttle Twins, man. You got to get those Tuttle Twin books.
I love it. I will. I'll definitely do that. A good buddy of mine, someone who you know as well, I'll leave his name out of the show, but he sent me a text the other day and he goes, here's the new toy that I bought off I think it was gunbroker.com. 300 blackout AR pistol.
He did?
Yeah. I was like, oh,
so
I'm so
proud.
jealous.
Wait,
Yeah.
the same friend I'm thinking of?
I don't know. I don't know who you're thinking of. But he lives in a state where he can buy that, so he had to have it shipped to an FFL, and then he's going to pick it up and take it to one of his properties. And
a mutual friend of ours.
You know him. You know who you know him.
Yeah, the one who just recently got his first gun.
No,
not
that one.
Oh, our other friend. I think
our other friend in a free state. He's not in California.
Yeah, because the other friend is not in a free state. Because I was going to be like, if he went to AR,
dude, I know, right? Oh, yeah, but you can't get an AR pistol in California, so that's
hey, something we need to pay attention to. We might be losing rights to those pretty soon.
Yeah, they're trying.
I mean, they're trying hard with they were starting with the whole issue with the honey badger. But it is looking like the Biden presidency, electioneasy, whatever you want to call them. They're going to be working with the ATF, and I think that's the move, which is going to put a lot of bad situations out there. There's a whole lot of guys that have AR pistols. Can you imagine if all of a sudden you've got to surrender it, pay another tax, or just be screwed? It's not good. So
no, it's stuff like that could actually, like if they started doing confiscation or even confiscation of your cash. Okay, you didn't give us the $200, and we know you've got 10 of these because you bought these through FFLs. We're going to take away, actually, how would they know that? In California would know it, but FFLs don't actually turn in that. What's it? 4473? Is that what the form number is? They don't actually turn that into the ATF. They have to hold on to it. And then if they get a call from the ATF, they got to go look up the serial number and find out who they sold it to. Yeah. That was to avoid a national registration.
And if things start getting hairy, like we're concerned that they will, I'm going to encourage gun stores to buy some incinerators. Buy yourself a good incinerator. And if it goes down, I mean, there needs to be a boating accident for those
yeah, forms. But then they go to jail. So, I mean, everything's got pros and cons. You need the Civil War to kick off. Exactly or right. You're going to jail.
It actually would need to be, hypothetically, in Minecraft, it would need to be coordinated to some extent. Like,
I don't think it would. I don't think the resistance is that coordinated.
I mean, in the broad sense of the guy, if a gun store hypothetically is going to dispose of the forms so that its buyers can't be tracked, it's going to have to get kicked off. Right, because otherwise he's going to be screwed. He's going to go to jail. Yeah. We've got to have things like we can't leave that guy hanging. Hypothetically, in Minecraft, should that ever come up,
that's why I think if there's an actual civil war, then that's the last thing anyone's thinking about, because there's a literal civil war going on, which I think we're heading down that path.
Yeah,
I really don't want one to happen.
But here's what I'm thinking though. Like if I'm them, what's the first thing I'm going to do to find out who's got what? I'm going to show up at a gun store and I'm going to get their records.
You're going to start digitizing all of that.
What's that?
You're going to start digitizing all of that.
Yeah. And so my thing is, like, it might become a very real thing that that gun stores are going to have to think about what to do with those forms. It's.
If anybody saw Red Dawn, that's how they found out who had the guns. After Russia invaded, they went to the gun store, looked up all the 4473s, and started going after everyone who had the guns.
Man,
I remember that was an actual line in Red Dawn because it was right after they passed all of that stuff.
Have you seen the meme? And it's Bert and Ernie from Sesame Street. And Ernie is wearing like what looks like a newspaper costume he's made. I don't know what the actual Sesame Street context is, but the quote or the comment on the meme is like, and that's when Bert realized that Ernie had never turned in the Form 4370. And now he's made them into body armor that he's going to use in the Boogaloo or whatever it was. It was great. It was so
hilarious.
So good stuff, man.
I tell you, it's interesting times for sure. And, the change in the government, because now we've got Trump, who's already set the precedent that, hey, the executive branch can just declare things illegal like he did with bump stocks.
Yeah.
And we're going to need it to go to the Supreme Court. Maybe, we've already seen the Supreme Court this last week basically go, hey, New York, you can't treat the First Amendment differently. You can't do that to religious organizations, which was actually a counter to what the Supreme Court had ruled before.
Yeah. By like a few weeks ago. We're talking about not long ago.
Yeah, not long. But now it's a different Supreme Court. Now it's a conservative on the Supreme Court. And they're like, basically, because it was a moot point, right? Because New York had already rescinded part of those rules of like how many people could meet. And they're like, no, we're basically making a statement here.
Yeah.
There's a new sheriff in town. You can't do that.
Yeah.
And I really agree that it's a matter of when, not if, are we going to have a Supreme Court case for a Second Amendment case go to the Supreme Court.
I think we're going to have things coming down the pike now.
But then that begs the question, okay, so are they going to try and push through more federal judges on the Supreme Court? Because there is no law that says how many people have to be on there. We've had different amounts in the past. We've had as high as 10 and as low as 6, I believe. 6 was the lowest.
Yeah. If they do that, we're in some big trouble.
Which I think they have to get. They have to win the Senate races in Georgia and get control of the Senate to be able to have a chance at that.
Yeah. Which this is a whole other interesting thing because there's so many, like, I'm not one of these guys that says that the election is going to get turned around and Trump's going to win. Like, I don't think that's going to happen. But we have acknowledged that there's been some real strange things. There's been some legitimate fraud that we did acknowledge that has happened, right? Whether it's enough to change the election. But some of these things are kind of curious. The fact that, like, the Republicans gained in the House, right? Was in the House, right?
Yeah.
We gained in the House. We have some of these other kind of places where we had gains. The other thing that's really interesting to me is that, as I'm understanding, and I haven't picked through all of it, but Biden won less counties than Obama did, if I'm understanding. Really? But he won by larger margins in several of them. And so that's one of the things that, like, all the really weird anomalies. So put aside anything else. If it's not fraudulent, I'm going to actually say that there's a pretty significant if there. But if it's not fraudulent, this is a really interesting election, right? Like, Obama only won, I think he only had like 65 million votes, if I'm understanding right. Trump had somewhere in the 70s. Somehow Biden gets in the 80s. That's huge.
Yeah, more people voting for Biden than voted for Obama, I find very hard to believe.
Right? Think about that. Right? And then the fact that he's, if I'm understanding right, like, I haven't picked through them all, but according to a couple of things I'm reading, he won less counties, but wider margin in certain counties. That's real weird. So, like, let's say there's nothing shady at all. I really am curious from a statistical standpoint. How does that happen? Like, politically, that's really interesting. Like, that's like, I want to know, like, is 538 doing like a special report on that? Because that's the kind of math that they would normally get really interested in. Like, let's talk about that. Like, let's assume the best. I really want to, like, I'm genuine here. Like, I really want to know about these really wild anomalies.
Right.
And there's some of the things that we were talking about before that, like, were explained, and the explanation made me say, I don't know. Okay, but let's see the data on that, and it's always a little fuzzy. So anyway, all that's interesting to me. That's neither here nor there, but interesting stuff.
You got to love it when the kid comes right in the middle of the podcast. You got to say hi to everyone. Oh, he took off.
He's gone. He's like, carry on. Thanks, buddy. All right. So anyway, I do want to encourage a couple of things. I know we're about out of time here, but I will give our plug for Lake Erie Arms, learms.net. Check it out. We are selling more stuff online as far as classes go. And if you're in the area here, Northeast Ohio, there are some amazing deals running. We got guns. We got guns to sell. We were getting a little nervous what it was going to look like before Thanksgiving, but man, we've got stuff. We had a great Black Friday weekend, still carrying on. We've got some special deals that are kind of bug out-ish that I'm just about to run ads on. So be ready for that. Come and check out learms.net. Sign up for if you sign up for the email list today, you should be able to get on to the next one. So good stuff, you guys.
Sweet. Well, guys, thanks so much for joining us today. We appreciate your time. Sorry we couldn't go live on Facebook with this one. Facebook doesn't like me right now.
Yeah.
I think because literally you and I talk too much smack about the Zuck. And so they've literally like done a lot of crap to me personally. And I'm like, I haven't done anything wrong. Like between the two of us, I'm like, I'm the teddy bear. I'm the teddy bear.
I'm the crazy one. Not crazy, but I'm the one who, if Zuck's going to be mad at somebody, you'd think he'd be mad at me.
Right? Right?
Yeah. Hey, by the way, Zuck,
we can tell it came from your account.
That's right. I'm like, Zuck, I don't appreciate you picking on my friend Pete.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah. That's good. Yeah.
All right, guys, we'll be back hopefully next week. We'll see, because I got to have a follow-up operation, and we're not sure when that's going to happen yet. So hopefully we'll be back next week, and hopefully we'll do it live. Hopefully I'll live if I have another operation. That's always my fear, man.
If all of a sudden stuff just quits coming out, like I'll just I mean, if I just don't hear from you one day, I'll just be like, well, I guess Pete died. I'll put a little post on.
Dude, I was telling that to my friend. She says something to me. She goes, because I mentioned, I go, hey, by the way, put in a good word to the Almighty for me. I got to go in for this surgery tomorrow, and I could die, right? And so she said, oh, the two biggest things you got to worry about. I can't remember what the first one was. It's probably like all the infections you get in hospitals and stuff like that. Like there's certain bacteria that's only in hospitals. Like that's where you get the worst of it, is in hospitals. And the second one is, the anesthesiologist, because they're the one that keeps you alive or kills you, right? And I said something like, well, if you don't hear from me after tomorrow, just know he sucked. Because that's my fear, right? The anesthesiologist is going to put me to sleep and not wake me back up. But,
Yeah.
Anyway,
hopefully we'll see you next week.
All right, guys. We'll talk to you later. Take care, everybody. Bye.
You've been listening to the From Concealment Podcast with Pete Mitchell and Dan Sams. Be sure to tune in next week for more gun talk. Also, check out the From Concealment website for more shooting-related goodness at FromConcealment.com.